Assalamu alaikum. Auzubillahi minash-shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Dear students, today we are going to start lecture number 14, which is polytypic species. So first of all, outlines of today's lecture. In today's lecture, we will discuss the concept of polytypic species and taxonomy, the importance of recognition of polytypic species taxa, and the difficulties in the application of polytypic species, and also examples. What will be the lecture outcomes? So after watching and listening to this lecture, student will know about the concept of polytypic and monotypic species concept in taxonomy. This will be the objective of today's lecture. What is polytypic species? Polytypic species by definition is any species that has two or more than two subspecies are actually called polytypic species. As the name indicates, poly mean many and typic mean types. So any species which has more than two subspecies. For example, if there is a species which has subspecies will be known as polytypic species. But if any species that has no subspecies will be known as monotypic, because they have only one type, mean one typic species. Poly mean many typic species, mean a species which has like subspecies. Or it's simple. What are subspecies? So subspecies are actually the geographically isolated members of the same species. Mean if there is a species A whose members are isolated geographically, for example, A dash population is living in one geography, A alpha is living in another geography, A beta is living in another geography, and A epsilon is living in another geography. So these A dash, A is the main species, the actual species, but the A dash, the A alpha, the A epsilon, the A beta, these are subspecies. So because they are like geographically isolated from the main population, so these geographic isolates are actually known as subspecies, and these subspecies are actually the idea came from this. The polytypic species idea came from here. When scientists they found that there are subspecies populations of a species, so they named those species as polytypic species. So if a species has subspecies, one or more than subspecies are known as polytypic species, and if a species has no subspecies are known as monotypic species. So for example, the horned lark is one example. You can see this horned lark, they have many populations, like they are distributed throughout the world. You can see them in Europe, in Asia, in China, and up to Mexico, Brazil, United States of South America. So you can find them everywhere. But now they are geographically isolated from each other. So the main horned lark, that is the Euromophila alpestris. So the Euromophila alpestris is the main species, is the main population, and then there are many other populations. So the main population was named, and you must know that polytypic species is named has a trinomial name, because the first one is generic name, the second one is the specific name, and then the third one is the subspecies name. So this Euromophila alpestris, the horned lark, Euromophila alpestris, has one main population, that is alpestris. So this is the main species, and then there are many others, like for example Euromophila alpestris strigata, so it's the subspecies. Then there is another subspecies, Euromophila alpestris flava is another, and then this Euromophila alpestris longirostris, this one is actually the Pakistani species, which even present in Pakistan in the Himalayas region and in the Pakistan northern side. So this Euromophila alpestris horned lark is a polytypic species, because it has many subspecies. This, like Eurymophylla alpestris. Alpestris is the main population, and then there is Eurymophylla alpestris striata. So this is the subspecific name. This is the subspecific name, and this is the subspecific name. This horned-dark Eurymophylla alpestris. These are the alpestris one, the main, the main population, or you can say the main species. And there, this alpestris has many subpopulations. So this is alpestris male, and this is alpestris female, and this is the striata subspecies. This is the ruba subspecies. This is the peregrina subspecies, the flava subspecies. Okay, these are the male members, and the brandy, the atlas, the pensillata male and the pensillata female. Then this bicomis and the telostri. So these are this one is found in China, so the Chinese, and other are also present throughout the world in the different region of the world. So these are actually subspecies of these all are the subspecies of this alpestris, Eurymophylla alpestris. So Eurymophylla alpestris striata, Eurymophylla alpestris ruba, and then the peregrina, and so on and so on. Species that are not divided into subspecies. So, like as I told you earlier, like those species which have no subspecies are known as monotypic species. Mono mean one, and typic mean type. So they have only one type. They have no subspecies. So subspecies, such species are known as monotypic species. So polytypic and monotypic terms were also used for polytypic and monotypic respectively. Like polytypic was used for polytypic species, and monotypic was used for monotypic subspecies in the literature. So Beckner in 1959 was the first who put forward the concept of polytypic species. So this the idea of polytypic species was actually given by Beckner in 1955. So the concept of polytypic species was most important development in classification of animals because certain local species from various parts of the world were combined into groups like allopatric species. So allopatric, what are allopatric species? Those species which are geographically isolated. So it's very simple. The definition of the subspecies is those populations which are like geographically isolated. And what is allopatric species? We have a detailed discussion on allopatric species. We had this discussion in the species terminologies chapter. So allopatric mean all those species which are totally geographically isolated. So like when this concept, the polytypic species concept was given, it was put forward. So it because of this, various parts of the species from the various parts of the world were combined into a group, allopatric species. So these allopatric species were more close to one another because like they were like similar species, and they were like more closely related to each other from the other populations of the world. So they were put in a very one unit, or in a single unit, which is known as polytypic species. So because of this polytypic species terminologies, a vast number of subspecific populations were they were integrated into only one and a sample unit, that is polytypic species. Now, importance of the recognition of polytypic species taxa. So what is the importance? Why it is important in taxonomy to use the polytypic species taxa or to introduce this taxa? So the concept of polytypic species have many advantages. Like for example, this concept greatly simplify the classification of groups like birds, mammals, snails, and butterflies. Now, why we are considering or giving example of birds or mammals and snails and butterflies? Because and such species or such members of such groups, they are highly developed, and because of too much diversity in them, or their introduction into different ecological conditions, there are many subspecific populations, and because of those subspecies, Like it was very difficult for scientists to, like, for example, if someone is studying Ramephala alpestris in Europe, and the other one is like studying the Ramephala alpestris in Pakistan, so both are the same population, but still there are differences, but they are like almost, maybe they are like morphologically they are different from each other, but if you bring them close together they will interbreed. So this is the actual issue, that one scientist is like studying Ramephala alpestris in Europe, and the other was as like studying that Ramephala alpestris in Pakistan, and one from China, and one from any other part of the world. So these geographic isolates were grouped into only one terminology, the polytypic species, like into one group. Like these birds, the Ramephala alpestris, the European one, the Ramephala alpestris longistris, the Pakistani one. So like they were like they were simple. It simplifies the classification. Like the introduction of the polytypic species taxa into taxonomy is going to simplify the vast number of species. Like for example, if you consider the European population one species, and then the Pakistani one is another species, and the Chinese one is another species, the American one is another species. So you have now 4 different species, but you consider, if you consider them as a one unit, as a polytypic species, so you are like integrating them into only one unit. So there is only one species which has then subspecies. So it actually simplifies the classification. And before the polytypic species concept, all these groups were classified in the form of monotypic species. So the Pakistani European lark was considered like different species. The European was considered as different species. The Chinese was considered as different species. But when this polytypic species taxa was like introduced, so it reduced the huge number of species into a very minimum, which was representing a complex classification. So when you have many species, the classification is complex, and when you have less species, so the classification will be simple. So but now their classification is very simple and complete by introducing this polytypic species. Like for example, due to polytypic species concept, 19,000 monotypic species of bird have been reduced to 9,000 species. So this is actually important. 19,000 monotypic species of birds have been reduced to 9,000 species only. So this is actually the very importance of polytypic species taxa. So a similar simplification has been reported for other groups of vertebrates and invertebrates, and this is only one example, that 19,000 bird species have been like reduced to 9,000 species. In the same way, from different animals have been reported, or similar reports have been reported from vertebrates groups and invertebrate groups. So it has like restored a definite biological meaning of species and its hierarchy, and it's all because of the introduction of this polytypic species taxa into the taxonomy. It restored the biological meaning of a species, because in biological species, what we consider the mating. So these sub like populations, these isolated population, when you give them a chance to interbreed, they can interbreed. So it's giving a proper meaning to the biological species concept, and it has provided best evidences for the process of allopathic speciation. And keep in mind, we also discussed allopathic speciation in detail in the previous lectures. So this the introduction of polytypic species, it actually paves the way for this allopathic species or speciation, because if there is polytypic species, there is allopathic speciation and evolutionary changes in peripheral population and intermediate stages. So by accepting polytypic species, you are automatically accepting allopathic speciation, evolutionary changes in peripheral populations and intermediate stages. So now there are, of course, there are difficulties and the application of polytypic species. So what are those like? In establishing polytypic species, the taxonomists are encountered by certain difficulties, which are like polytypic species are composed of allopathic populations, and it is difficult to decide whether two allopathic populations belong to same polytypic species or they are two different but closely related polytypic species. So now when scientists, when they are going to classify these or study these allopathic populations, so it is very difficult for them because such species, they have very close resemblance. So it need a very keen eye and a very keen study to classify them properly. So scientists actually face these problems like during classification. They cannot decide whether the two allopathic population, they are belong to the same polytypic species or if they are two different but closely related polytypic species. So the first problem is this one. Then closely related species with similar ecological requirements occasionally replace each other geographically, and then it is difficult to decide whether they are a full species or subspecies. And this is another problem. Those subspecies which are closely related and they are with similar ecological requirements, mean if they have similar ecological requirements, so sometimes they replace each other like geographically. They go from one migrate from one ecology to another flow to another one. And then it is difficult for a taxonomist or a systematist to decide whether they are full species or it is subspecies. So it will be difficult for them because they switch occasionally their geography. So it is and this is the definition, that they will be geographically isolated. But if they are switching, and then you cannot decide that whether it is subspecies or it is a full species. Uh, Another problem is isolated populations are in the middle of the process of evolving into new species and are on the borderline between species, subspecies and species. So uh, as I told you that by accepting polytypic species, you are considering you are considering and you are accepting the evolution. So these isolated populations are actually these are the parts or rudiments for the evolution. So these small populations which are isolated from each other, they are actually in the process of evolving into new species, and sometimes they are on the border line between the subspecies and the full species. So then again here taxonomists, they face difficulties that what to do or how to classify them as a full species or to classify them as a subspecies. Polytypic species in animal kingdom. So and certain groups of animal kingdom like mammals, birds, snails and butterflies, it is recognized that about 40 to 80% of these species are polytypic. So in bacteria and plants and protista, there are like polytypic species, but we will talk about the animal kingdom. So in animal kingdom, 40 to 80% of these groups, mammals, birds and snails and butterflies, they have like polytypic species. Some specialized group like certain host-specific parasites do not readily form polytypic species and have monotypic species. So such some host-specific parasite, they are restricted to certain hosts, so they do not readily form polytypic species, and they remain like monotypic. And however, rarely they may also have polytypic species, but sometimes they also have like polytypic species. Nomenclatural problems. When you are accepting polytypic species, there are nomenclatural problems too, because in nomenclature there is specific generic name and then the specific name. So it's binomial nomenclature. But when you consider polytypic species concept, then you are going to adopt a trinomial nomenclature, because the first one will be generic, the second one will be specific, and the third one will be subspecific name or subspecies name. So when we name such species, as they are often a compound of several species proposed as monotypic species. Now, for example, there is a bird, white wagtail. It's a small bird living on the bank of rivers, having different colors like yellow, reddish, and brown. So the different populations, you will consider them as monotypic species. But when scientists study them and then they come to this decision that no, it's not monotypic species. polytypic species, then you are going to face some problems. Like for example, it was first this white wagtail. This was first like recognized, identified by Linnaeus, and he named this Swedish population. And keep in mind, this white wagtail is also very like widely distributed through the world. So the Swedish population was named by Linnaeus as Motacilla alba. So now there are certain other species which were recognized from other geographic region as monotypic species. So the same Motacilla species were recognized by many other scientists from different regions, like not from Swedish but from different other European countries and from American countries. They were like recognized by many other scientists as monotypic species, because they didn't know at that time they actually this white wagtail or Motacilla is actually a polytypic species. So what happened? So now the newly recognized 8 population were found to be subpopulation of Motacilla alba of Linnaeus. So now for the first time this white wagtail was recognized by Linnaeus. The Swedish population was named as Motacilla alba by Linnaeus. But then many other populations were recognized as monotypic species. But when scientists studied it, they found that these newly introduced 8 populations were actually the subpopulation or the subspecies of the Motacilla alba of Linnaeus. So those 8 populations were also named by those different scientists. So now what to do? What name should be kept and what name should be discarded? So for this there is a law. We will study that in the coming chapters, but let's resolve this issue first. This is actually the white wagtail, the Motacilla alba. So this because Linnaeus for the first time identified the species as Motacilla alba, so this was considered the main species, Motacilla alba. And then we will discuss the other population were then named as subspecies and they were given as subspecific name. So this one is the white wagtail, Motacilla alba. So these species are like first Motacilla alba by Linnaeus in 1758. Then from Tamanic it was another species was recognized, Lugubrius. So it was named as Motacilla alba lugubrius. From Sykes, Doconensis was reported, so it was named as Motacilla alba Doconensis. This one from Swedish. So from Swedish, the Swedish population was named by Linnaeus as Motacilla alba. From Tamanic, Lugubrius. From Sykes, Doconensis. So these were named afterwards. Like maybe these were identified as different species. But when scientists identified that no, these are the subpopulation, so then the Motacilla alba was kept the main species because it was identified first by Linnaeus. So that was Motacilla alba was the main species, and then these are the subspecies of that Motacilla alba lugubrius, Motacilla alba doconensis. From Swanho, UK, the Motacilla alba basilensis. And from another one is from Swanho, UK, Motacilla alba ocularis, and from Gold the Motacilla alba leucopsis. Another from Gold is the Motacilla alba personata, and from Bled there was a Motacilla alba hodgsoni, and from Cattleyids there was a Motacilla alba lugens. So these were these 8 different populations were these 8 different populations were considered then as subspecies of this Motacilla alba. In this picture you can see the alba, Motacilla alba, Motacilla alba doconensis, Motacilla alba basiliensis, ocularis, logens, leucopsis. This is another one, the albodies, the personata, subpersonata, Yareli. This is another picture of the populations like alba and ocularis and logens and leucopsis. And you can see in this previous picture, you can see it's very easy. Like this alba is from this Swedish area, and this is again from this Europe. This one is also from Europe. This one is from personata, is again from Europe. This is from somewhere in China. This is from somewhere in Russia, in Asia. This is from Asia. This is from Asia. This is from Asia. This one also from Asia. So these populations are from Asia. This one is, I think, from the Africa, and this of these are from the Europe. So in these, each population has its own name and described as separate species. So problem arose because they were like, as I told you, these 8 population were like had its own name and they were described as separate species. So then problem arose that what scientific name and of what author should be given to the polytypic species. But as according to the law of first person who identified, that was Linnaeus. So he, for the first time, identified the Swedish population. So it was considered as Motacilla alba of Linnaeus, which was characterized as a nominated species, subspecies, and then the other were named after this one. These are the references. Thank you so much for listening and watching. If you have any question, please feel free to ask.